All right, welcome to part 5. So today we'll be going over the objections to the resurrection. First, I'm going to define a few terms. So first, we're going to define the term that is way too small. Let me get a new marker. New mark. So, it's still too small. You can read that, can you? All right. So, no one cares. So the first definition I'm going to define is ad hoc. So ad hoc is an extraneous hypothesis that just exists to save your theory from being falsified. So an example of an ad hoc hypothesis is Jimmy, the 15-year-old, gets condoms found in his bedroom by his mother. His mother goes up to little Jimmy and says, "Jimmy, why do you have these? You're way too young." And Jimmy says, "They aren't mine." His mom replies, "Whose are they?" Jimmy replies back with, "They're my father's." His mother then replies with, "But your father's dead, Jimmy." Jimmy now says, this is where it becomes ad hoc, "My father rose from the dead. He strolled into a gas station, bought this pack of condoms, put it in my room, and then went back to his grave." That would be an ad hoc hypothesis. That's just a term you're going to have to learn because a lot of the objections to resurrection I would define as ad hoc. So the first objection we're going to go over is disciples made it up. If you watched the last video, you'll know the immediate issue with this theory. And the immediate issue with the theory is that it does not explain the empty tomb. The disciples making up the story doesn't simply make a body disappear from a tomb. So you would have to explain that. You would have to couple this theory with another thing. But let's just look at this theory on its own merits. There is absolutely zero incentive for disciples to make up something like this. Think about it. They're fishermen. Sure, their lives are a little boring. That was Peter Atkins. That's what Peter Atkins said. Oh, they made up the resurrection because they were bored. That's essentially what he said. Yeah, they're a bit bored, but would they really make up this whole entire story and endanger their lives just because they were bored? I mean, what incentive do they really have? Let's look at just how 3 of the apostles died, or followers, I should say. Is James an apostle? Yeah, I think James considers him apostle, so we'll call them apostles. Let's look at the 3 that we know for sure were executed. I would argue more were. So, James, brother of Jesus, was stoned to death for his faith. Paul was beheaded for his faith, and Peter was crucified upside down. Sucks for his faith. Now the question would really become, these people from very different backgrounds. I picked these 3 specifically because they all come from very different backgrounds to the following of Jesus. So Peter was obviously Jesus' disciple. So, I mean, I guess he's a pretty good candidate to be part of the conspiracy. What about Paul? Paul was murdering Christians before he became one. What about James? James was Jesus' brother when Jesus was alive. I mean, according to all records we have, all of his brothers thought he was crazy. So, you would have to explain a diversity of the people who came to believe, genuinely believe, and why these diverse range of people that believed in Jesus' resurrection were willing to die for it. And also, remember the criteria of embarrassment from last video. If the story was made up, why would they have things like the woman finding the tomb? I mean, things like this at this time would make your story extremely less credible. I mean, they weren't even allowed to serve as witnesses in Jewish courts. Yet they made them the discoverers of the empty tomb. The primary witnesses, the first witnesses, they made women, which immediately, I mean, there were probably a lot of Jewish people who denied the resurrection on the basis of women finding the tomb. Are you telling me they just made that up? So all of these factors combined, I think this theory is extremely improbable. Now we're going to go over a ridiculous one, the twin theory. Robert Gray Cabot So Robert Gray Cabot's theory is that Jesus had a twin brother that no one knew about, a long-lost twin brother. And then, after Jesus died, his twin brother came back, and then everyone confused him for the real Jesus. So, I defined the word ad hoc recently in this video, or I should say at the start of the video. Why can't I say this? At the start of this video, I defined the word or phrase ad hoc, and I defined it specifically for this theory. Why on this? Because remember, the theory is trying to find an explanation of the facts. Well, this theory doesn't even explain the empty tomb, actually, but the point of these theories is trying to explain the facts, the best explanation possible. That's what we're trying to find. So in theory, yeah, I guess the twin theory could have happened, but what are the odds of it? Like 0.1%, 0.0000001%? Ad hoc. All right, next we have the theory of the disciples stole the body and then made it up. So this one actually explains them, and this is the first theory we're going to go over that actually explains all the facts. The issue is it's not a very good explanation. So we already explained the idea of the disciples making up doesn't really make much sense. But what about stealing the body? How probable is that? Well, let's go over some facts. So, it's commonly agreed upon that there was about one night where the tomb was not guarded by soldiers, Roman, Jewish, we don't know. One night. So this is really the only time frame the body could have been stolen. One singular night. Why not after? Because, I mean, these are poor fishermen. Even, let's suppose the Roman guards at the tomb. How are they going to get in? How are they going to get the body? Well, they're going to bribe them with what money? Right? So, really only this one night could be the time frame for the disciples stealing the body. And in theory, is that possible? Sure. But I would argue that we have no positive reason to believe that over the explanation God raised Jesus from the dead. As I said earlier, there's very little incentive for them to make it up. There's no incentive for them to steal the body. And also, if they made it up, why would they not make up the story as to where the guards were at the tomb from the beginning? It's commonly known in legends and myths that they make it purposefully convenient for their theory. This is not very convenient for their theory because someone would just say, oh, they stole the body in one night. But there's also another issue with this theory. The other issue with the theory is that when they came to seal the tomb, when they came to guard the tomb, they sealed it. In order to hold to this theory, you must believe not only that the disciples were able to steal the body, but also that when the people who came to seal the tomb sealed it, they didn't check if the tomb was empty, if the tomb was tampered with or not. So, while in theory, yes, I suppose it is possible, I don't think it's a very good explanation of the facts. Given how improbable everything is, I mean, the odds of all this happening are very low. I would propose this is not as good of an explanation as God raising Jesus from the dead. Now, the apparent death theory. So this theory, surprisingly, has been pushed by a few people, actually. For example, say Shabir Ali, who's a Muslim. It's quite odd. I'm not going to get into that, but it's kind of weird for a Muslim to take any of these theories. But the theory states that Jesus didn't die. That's it. Jesus didn't actually die, so there is no resurrection. There are multiple issues with this theory. So one, it's narrated in John that after Jesus was punctured, water and blood spilled out. That's a clear sign of asphyxiation, so that theory is falsified. There you go. But someone may counter and say that, oh, well, that account is not reliable. Okay, let's forget about that. That doesn't exist anymore. So this is what you must believe. Jesus was scourged, which left some of the people who went through it with their guts spilling out. So Jesus, obviously, we all agree he survived that, but he suffered considerable damage. He was not able to carry the cross up to the site. He was then crucified by professional executionists. He survived. And then Joseph of Arimathea buried this seemingly dead body, I suppose. And then Jesus got out of the tomb. Then he went to the disciples and talked to them. And then the disciples believed he was raised from the dead. Now, understand this part. Jesus is in a tomb that's covered by a rock that weighs 1,000 to 3,000 pounds. How does he get out? There's two explanations. One, the rock, let's assume it's the night before the tomb got sealed. This is a 1,000 to 3,000 pound rock. Jesus, who's freshly scourged, freshly crucified, pushes this, let's call it 2,000 pounds, 2,000 pound rock over. It falls, he gets out, and then, because remember, they sealed it, so then he picks up this 2,000 pound rock, puts it back, and then it just runs away and sees the disciples 3 days later. What? Or you can say that the Roman guards assisted him. But why would they do that? If they got caught, what incentive do they have to help Jesus? Again, is that in theory possible? Sure. But is it likely? Is it more probable than the other theory we have? No, it's not even close to more probable. So, I think that's self-explanatory. Now, one may say, okay, Jesus wasn't buried, which is something Bart Ehrman has suggested. I would make this a separate objection to specifically what Bart Ehrman said. I'll make that a separate video. But in short, the idea that Jesus wasn't buried is just to go against one of the most commonly attested to facts of Jesus' story. Now, we have another popular one. I'm not sure why. The hallucination theory. The hallucination theory states that the disciples hallucinated Jesus being risen. Now, again, if you've been paying attention, you'll know the biggest issue with this theory, and the biggest issue with the theory is that the empty tomb is not explained by this. You don't explain the empty tomb by saying the disciples hallucinated. Hallucinations don't make objects move. Okay? So, the theory, boom, theory's falsified. There you go. But, let's assume the tomb is empty now. This is what you have to believe. So, there are two lines of thought. You can either believe the immediate accounts of 15 people experiencing Jesus. So these 15 people we need to hallucinate. The 12, is it 15? Yeah, it's 15. The 12 apostles, including Peter, Thomas, etc., Mary Magdalene, Paul, and James, Jesus' brother, and there's a few others that are counted. Let's say 15. 15 people. You need to believe all 15 of these people have hallucinated essentially the same thing on multiple different occasions in multiple different areas. And if we are to take the 1 Corinthians 15 creed seriously, and the account of the 500 brethren who saw Jesus alive. Now, why should we believe this? I think because for two reasons. One, in another gospel is narrated Jesus was teaching upon a mountain after his resurrection. I think most scholars would agree that it's probably the same accounting to the same event that Paul accounts to in the appearance of the 500. And if you read Paul's creed, it also says that though some have fallen asleep, many of them are alive today. Now, given historical context, this is essentially him saying, oh, you don't believe me? Go talk to the witnesses. A lot of them are still alive. This also obviously means he knew who saw Jesus in that appearance of 500. So if you want to take the theory that I believe is probably true that the appearance of the 500 is accurate, then you would need to believe over 500 people hallucinated the same exact thing, with a small subset of them hallucinating the same thing on multiple different occasions. All right, last one. I know this isn't the last objection to Jesus' resurrection. There's more, but these are the mainline ones I see the most. So the last one is very simply falsified. It's the rejection of the person who is either stupid or just doesn't want to believe. And this objection is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now, I generally agree with this principle. All right, so my phone died. I'll make this very short. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That does not apply to this case because you only need to prove that Jesus died and he was seen again afterwards. That's it.